Hey guys, it's Dash Zach back with my first keyboard review. It's the MCHOSE Jet 75, a Hall effect keyboard in my favorite layout. Full disclosure, I'm not a keyboard enthusiast necessarily, but I have been using mechanical keyboards for the last 15 years, and Hall effect keyboards for the last couple of years. I've had 4 or 5 of them, and this one is by far my favorite. Let me tell you why. So here we have it, the MCHOSE Jet 75. Right out of the box, this thing was rock solid. The build quality is quite good. The case is made of plastic, but it's very high quality. No bending or flexing. It's just got some nice heft to it. You can see here on the back, there's also 2 different settings for the feet here, or supports that make it much more comfortable to type on than something like the Wooting that just doesn't have that at all. The keycaps I got are the white topographic, and they are fully shine through, which looks really good. I'll show you that later. They're also very stable here, which is awesome. And the overall feel of this keyboard has been amazing for me. As far as other options go, there's also the black topographic, which would have probably been my first choice, but I have enjoyed this white topographic. And there's also just the standard white colorway. Again, I got the Magnetic God switches. That does add $20 to the price tag. The other option being the Starburst magnetic switch. If you look back, the version I got is $90, but you could get this keyboard as cheap as $59 with the white colorway and the Starburst magnetic switches. Use code DAZ for a discount. Some key features include 0.1 millisecond latency, as well as 8K polling rate and 128K scaling rate. For those of you that are unaware, the polling rate is the rate at which your PC checks for input from the keyboard, and the scan rate is the rate at which the keyboard checks itself for input. What I've looked into, polling rate is what you're really looking for, but this scan rate number is quite impressive here compared to other keyboards that I've seen. 2 other things I did want to cover here are the layers in the keyboard. The, I believe, Poron foam and silicone pad feet contribute a lot to how amazing this thing sounds and feels to type on. One last thing I wanted to cover is the switch difference here. The Magnetic God, the one that I have, there's a 35 plus or minus 5 gram force actuation and 3.5 millimeters of total travel. If you move over to the Starburst magnetic switch, it's 32 plus or minus 5, so a slightly lighter actuation and a slightly lower amount of total travel here. I'm assuming the stability on these might be a little bit lower and the life cycle is the same, but overall these have felt amazing for me. Cannot speak to the Starburst, but again, these being more expensive, I'm assuming these are the higher, more premium switch. Overall, my experience with this has just been really damning for the Wooting 68G, which I have been maining for over a year now. As you saw earlier, the stability on this keyboard is really, really good on these keys here. I had previously been using this Ajazz AK680 Max for a week before testing this, and I was in love with this over the Wooting. Again, the stability here is really nice, and I'll do a sound test across all these keyboards later. This had made the Wooting feel terrible, and now this MCHOSE has made that Ajazz feel terrible. If we take a look at the Wooting stability here on these keys, first of all, I mean, they just look a little bit cheaper, and they're already gotten pretty glossy with use over time, but look how wobbly these keys are, and the feel of this keyboard has just been extremely unimpressive since I started using both the Ajazz, but especially the MCHOSE Jet 75, and again, look at this complete lack of support here to make your typing experience comfortable. I think overall, MCHOSE has just put the most thought into the sound and feel of this keyboard, as well as the overall layout being 75. I really enjoy. Having these dedicated arrow keys here is awesome. I have been using Mod Tap on my Wooting, and I assign the shift function control and menu keys to the arrows. I want to occasionally get typing errors based on that, which I just kind of dealt with. I also, I'm not going to lie, I love having this function arrow back here, as well as this ability to hit the tilde key without losing my mind and forgetting how to access it easily. MCHOSE does have this WebDriver for the Jet 75. This is the Chinese version because it loads better on my Chrome, but you can set the language to English here and you'll have no issues. The AK680 from Ajazz had a crappy firmware that was just an application, and it was really hard to navigate, so I thought to myself, maybe Wooting is the only one that has an awesome WebDriver. False, this one's great from MCHOSE. There are some color settings here you can mess around with. I really enjoy this Blossom Dance. I'll show you that later. As far as trigger settings, this is what you're going to be more concerned about. You can set your trigger actuation point down to 0.1 millimeters here, and then you can also set your rapid trigger to 0.02 millimeters here, which is very sensitive and what I usually have my WASD key set to. Actually, I think I put that usually at about 0.4 to be comfortable with not just bumping them accidentally, while still having them be really responsive. I just have these in sort of a middle ground right here to make typing super comfortable at the moment. You can mess with dead zones too if you want, and then change individual keys. As far as the other key settings go, I haven't messed around with this anymore. Advanced key-wise, it has SOCD, Rappy Snappy. You should use that. I use SOCD. I assign it to A and D, as you see here. You can set the trigger point at which it actuates, and then control all the settings you would be able to as well. You also have DKS, should use that. Mod Tap, again, I don't use that on this keyboard. I did use it on my previous Wooting, but we have the arrow keys here, which is all I was using it for. Performance-wise, we have polling rate. I have mine set to 8K. It's at 128K scan rate automatically. I run this with both stability mode and berserk mode on, and I've had 0 issues on my side, and the rest of the settings just deal with firmware upgrades, which I will say there have been a few firmware upgrades for this already, and it just came out, so really impressive support from MCHOSE. Let's hit our progressive sound tests first. The Wooting 68G, completely stock. Next up, we have the Ajazz AK680 Max. And lastly, the MCHOSE Jet 75. So the way I would describe the difference between those keyboards is the Wooting just feels kind of like a cheap plasticky toy. I'll be honest, when I first used the 60HE, it felt like God's gift to typing and just gaming in general compared to my standard mechanical keyboard I've been using, some basic Corsair one. But after switching to the Ajazz AK680 Max, it made the Wooting feel like a toy, and this MCHOSE Jet 75 does the same to all of them. I would say the difference between this and the AK680 is the AK680 is a little clackier, a little more hollow, whereas this is just very solid. You can see here, there's no wobble here. If I press down, there's no wobble. It's just very, very solid. I'm not like a keyboard enthusiast again, so I don't know if I'm going to call it creamy, thocky, clacky. This feels a little less clacky, just a little like creamier from what I've gauged, and it's just the most satisfying to me. It feels the most solid to me. You get the best responsiveness when you're pressing the keys. You know you press them and they're actuating. The performance across all of these was very similar in my experience, but I've looked at other testing online, and these keyboards from MCHOSE seem to have top tier performance. The Wooting actually has a couple milliseconds of latency, and the MCHOSE keyboards are typically sub 1 millisecond latency. So oddly enough, you're getting theoretically better performance for 1/3 of the price. And I guess my overall takeaway here would just be I can no longer justify using a Wooting. I can no longer justify having a Wooting beside using it for other comparisons. I wouldn't recommend anybody to go buy a Wooting. I mean, honestly, Mad Lions Mad 68HE, whatever it's called, this Ajazz, any keyboard like that is going to outperform the Wooting. Not necessarily outperform the Wooting, but perform good enough that you just cannot justify the price of a Wooting. But honestly, this Jet 75, it is just the best of the best that I've used thus far. The sound test, hopefully it was apparent there how much better this sounds than either of the other two keyboards, and particularly the Wooting. If I bring this back over here, like we're just rattling all over, like that's just super hollow. There's like almost zero consideration in my opinion to sound. If you see here on the Wooting, if I click this key down here, it's really, really wobbly, and at the top it's also really, really wobbly. So honestly, just not great quality there. I was super excited when I got my Wooting. Now I'm not so hot on it, and honestly, with the frequency at which MCHOSE has updated the keyboard and all the settings they have, features that match Wooting, I'll be making this Jet 75 going forward unless some company sends me some magical keyboard that outdoes this, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. In game, I had no issues. This felt as responsive, if not more, than the Wooting. Honestly, one of the better typing experiences I've had on a keyboard, which is not something I can typically say for the Hall Effect keyboards. I would make some mistakes on the Wooting more often than I would on a standard keyboard. And again, the weird mod tap setup I had, which on the Wooting was using these 4 keys in the corner for arrows, would cause me to randomly just like lose my spot in typing, and I would just double tap things, and it was kind of a mess, I'll be honest. Not a problem here with the arrow keys. I will say the one thing you're not going to get is the volume dial up here in the top right corner. I've learned in short usage, because I did have a keyboard with that for a period of time, I don't really use it. I don't really mind it. If that's a deal breaker for you, that's unfortunate. You're going to want to skip this keyboard, but again, that's about my only complaint, and to me, it's not even a complaint. So another thing you may have noted, the switches are boxed, and they are also pre-lubed, which really just helps in how great the typing experience on this thing is. So that about wraps up for my thoughts on the MCHOSE Jet 75. Thanks to MCHOSE for letting me get slightly early access to this, and honestly, this has changed my gaming experience and how amazing this feels to type and play on. It is worlds above the Wooting in the overall experience out of the box, and also outperforms the Ajazz that I have. I've also tested a Gamma K TK68HE, and that thing does not feel remotely as good as this. This is by far the highest quality, most premium feeling keyboard that I've ever tested. As a non-keyboard enthusiast who does not really tinker with keyboards, more of a mouse enthusiast, this will 1000% be my main going forward. And yeah, only good things to say about this thing. You will not regret picking it up. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave a like. Check out the Discord server and the MouseCast podcast. And with that, we'll see you.